Hello, everyone. Welcome to the five-part webinar series on community management. I'm your moderator, Judy Gordon, VP of Marketing for Omnisparx. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping tips. You should see a chat function in your view. Please enter any questions there or on the Omnisparx Telegram channel at Omnisparx. We'll be answering any questions at the end. Today is the second webinar in our series. We're going to talk about tips for building a successful community. Before we get started, a quick introduction to the sponsors. Omnisparx is a premier collaboration platform for crypto organizations to create and share value within their communities. For more information, visit omnisparx.io. The Chicago Blockchain Project is building an infrastructure for the city of Chicago, connecting builders with resources and investors. And now I'd like to introduce you to our presenters. Today we have Franklin Fitch from Beaxy.
Hey everyone.
And Franklin brought a guest.
I did, a surprise guest here. We've got Digital Lawrence. He's been working with Beaxy on some things, and he's a crypto influencer and content creator as well, and used to work as community manager for Odyssey. So excited to have him here with us.
Yep. Hey everybody.
All right, we're having some technical difficulties with the presentation.
No. Okay.
Yeah,
it's working for him, but not. Can you load it?
Is it doing? Are you on the full screen now?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be.
All right, but let's get started.
So I could kind of go into my background and profile while we sync up the slides and everything. So I have a background in psychology. I actually studied psychology most of my life, and have an MS in consumer psychology. My previous work before getting into crypto involved consulting for a variety of different Fortune 500 companies. Oh, they're saying it looks good on their end. So is it? So they're able to see the slides moving, is that correct?
I haven't seen the slide. There's still someone. Oh, what's wrong with it? I'll get this in.
Okay. Cool. So I have a background in kind of marketing, market research consulting, and specifically a style of community-oriented research that involves collection of big data from online communities, using different scraping tactics, pulling that into a database, processing it, analyzing it, and looking for patterns in consumer behavior inside of that data, and then presenting that data and the findings therein in reports to these clients. And so I had the privilege to work with a lot of great brands, your Intels, Apples, Googles of the world, and really some exciting work, and the fact that it was community oriented kind of led me down this path. Found crypto about 2 years ago, and sort of continued to dive deeper down the rabbit hole. Really, the main part of that journey started with my own community that I started called the Crypto Fam, which we grew to a 20,000 plus following social brand on Twitter. Have some other online presence as well. Currently I'm head of marketing for Beaxy Exchange, which is an upcoming crypto exchange launching in late January. Have a couple other things I work on. I also work with Omnisparx, just advising them on how to engage with social platforms in crypto. And so really excited to talk to everyone today about what I've learned on this journey, and a few things that in talking with Lawrence, we think are best practices when approaching communities. So we want to. Cool.
All right.
Perfect. Okay, so let's dive into it, ladies and gents. The first topic, and what I did here was I kind of took some of the commentary from the Telegram chat and saw what questions people had about crypto communities. And I understand many of you are experienced community manager yourself. By no means am I the authoritative expert on any given subject. I think I just have a unique background and set of experience that might be atypical for someone who ends up in a community management position or marketing oriented position in crypto. Because I have a background in market research and psychology, hopefully I can just offer you guys some unique perspectives on how to think about your jobs and how to think about what it is that a crypto community represents and community more broadly represents. So when we talk about scaling a crypto community, there are a few things that we can do to kind of galvanize growth. And so one of those is pretty obvious, and that's incentives. I think we have thought about incentives in the wrong way for much of the history of crypto. Crypto has potential to do very unique incentive mechanisms where they're sort of built into the system, and you're naturally funneled along through a sort of decentralized community aspect. What we got caught in, I think, was a trap where we took the easy way out, with free airdrops, and we got away from incentivizing meaningful, discrete actions. And so I think if we're looking at incentives and how we can improve incentives, we really need to look at things that don't involve just giving someone something without an action being taken. Referral programs are a great hybrid where you're giving someone incentive, but they need to sign up and complete specific actions. And so another crypto project that I really like, that I actually just spoke with the other day and sort of scoped out their solution is Referium. They have a solution that's actually just a few lines of code that they will plug straight into your web page, and that will allow basically a plugin where folks can level up, so to speak. They can acquire points by completing certain actions. That could be in the form of liking a post, sharing a post, retweeting a tweet. It could also be in the form of completing KYC if you're more of a financial instrument. Any of those kind of actions, you can determine in partnership with them what actions you would like to incentivize users to complete, and then you can actually determine what amount of points would be rewarded for those discrete actions. Those points would then add up, so the incentives aren't direct. You're actually just adding those points up into a bank, and then if they have a certain amount, they can achieve different user levels. So that could be bronze, gold, silver, whatever you want to call it. And those user levels would actually be what give people access to features or benefits. And so it's a way of kind of stratifying incentives. It's a way of having incentives work for you and not against you. We've seen issues where airdrops can cause token dumping. So we don't just want to give people our native token outright, and we certainly don't want to give them a native token if they haven't done any meaningful actions. An email is not enough. The second part here, and this is something that was coming out of conversation with my pal Lawrence here, who is a great content creator, is the old adage that content and messaging is king. The one specific piece of advice here that comes out of the psychology research that I would give you is to start abstract and then get specific. What does that mean? As you approach a launch date, for example, the first kind of messaging that you want to put out, if you're 6 months out from launch, needs to be abstract. It needs to be, what is the value of your product in your company? What does your brand mean? What does it represent to a consumer? What is the whole point of you doing this? That's what you want to talk about at first, because you need to be starting abstract and speaking to the value systems that you're trying to uphold with your initiative. And then as you get towards the launch date, you want to transition into more and more specific, more and more specific kinds of messaging. What are the features? What's it all about? What dates are relevant, right? So you think about it, if you're throwing an event, you're throwing a party, 6 months out from the party, you might want to say, socializing with your friends is really valuable. Here are the reasons why. If you're a week out from the party, that kind of information is less pertinent. And the information that's more pertinent is who's DJing the party, what time is it, what should I bring, right? So with your messaging, you want to have that funneling approach, even at the level of the concept and subject matter. And then the last piece here in regards to scaling is just engagement. If you put out 5 pieces of content that don't do very well because they weren't well thought out and you didn't put much time into them, you would have been better off to put out 2 to 3 pieces of content that you'd focus more on and had more legitimate value. Part of engagement also is stimulating conversations between community members. Ways that you can do this are ask, general, I don't want to call them baiting questions, but they're designed to pull people in and start a dialogue. So, hey, what does everyone think about blank? We did this a lot with Beaxy. One of our significant accomplishments thus far has been building what is probably the largest influencer group, community Discord channel in the crypto space. We were able to do this by, prioritizing engagement. And so we would be really, really proactive with messaging these people. We want to create relationships at the end of the day. And I think that's what often gets overlooked, is that it's not a community where you're just greasing the wheels and you want people to have mindless chat with one another. You want to legitimately engage them. You want to develop relationships with everyone in the community if possible, and you want them to develop relationships with one another. And so being able to scale a community that's really important, to have those relationships between community members. That's what's going to bring them back. You don't have the time to be able to spend maintaining every single relationship. So you need to have relationships that work for you, and you need those relationships to be able to scale. So another question, which I thought was an excellent one from the chat, is how do we answer questions at scale? So there's kind of 2 parts to this answer. The first part is maybe obvious, and I would hope many of you are using these methods currently, but leveraging pin messages, pin tweets, FAQs, this sort of thing where you've sat down and said, what are the most common questions that we're going to be asked? What are questions that we think could come up in the future that we want to get ahead of? That's a really important part of this too. It's not just right now, today, what are the questions that need to be answered? It's really, let's think 6 months, a year down the line. What are people going to ask us about? When Beaxy was structuring its token sale and restructuring it, we were thinking, okay, people are going to ask us about, securities, about STOs. We need to have answers prepared for those so that we look good when we say, guys, go here. We've actually already answered that in this document, and pin those so that hopefully people find them themselves. It reduces a bit of legwork because that question never even comes up in the chat. So that's one piece, and really leveraging those, being thorough with how you want to answer those questions and the amount of questions that you want to answer. It's not a bad thing to have, a 50 question FAQ that you pin on your Telegram channel and everywhere else to just be that blanket answer for many of these questions. So that's, I think, a very easy way to start to answer questions at scale. But then in terms of like those more probing questions or trying to identify more about your audience, this comes down to something that I was talking about with Judy. First, you need to think about your brand. You need to think about your product as well. That's where this whole thing starts. You really need to sit down as a team and do kind of a session where you talk about what values you want your brand to represent, what key differentiators your product has versus other competitive products in the landscape, and then what kind of person would be interested in those brand values and will be interested in those product differentiators, right? Because that's a thought exercise at first. Before you even start gathering data, that's something that you have to think about yourself. Those answers can't come from anyone else but you. So that has to be a team exercise. I would highly recommend doing that. As a Beaxy team, we've done that. We have ongoing conversations about what the brand means and what it represents, writing down those words that we think exemplify what our brand represents. And so once you've gotten that, once you've gotten a really good sense of what are our words that we want to stand for as a brand, what are those things that we know we're better at than our competitors in terms of product features or factors, then you can go into the market research and polling phase. But you can't dive into that stuff before you have a very, very clear sense of what is your brand and product all about. Once you have that sense, then you can get into polling. So you've got your brainstorming done. You get a sense of what kind of target audience would be interested in those things that you've just identified about your brand and product. And then you can start asking those targeted questions. So this can be in the form of Twitter polling, which I'm a big fan of. It's super low impact. You don't have to really do much more than create a poll, and it takes max like 1 to 2 minutes. And you can do that pretty regularly. There are crypto influencers whose entire brand persona is basically just polling the community, and that adds significant value. Asking targeted questions is key. So I included a link here to questionnaire design. This is probably something most folks are not experts on. Most people in the world are not experts on this at all. So be very much aware of how questionnaire design plays into the answers that you get. The way that you ask a question will certainly shape the answer. And the last piece here is a tool called Full Contact. So this is a audience profiling tool, if you will. You can upload in bulk emails. You can upload in bulk Twitter handles. You can upload in bulk a variety of things. So this could be, your whole audience. You've got their Twitter handles downloaded from your profile, and you can actually plug them into Full Contact and find out what other things they're interested in. So this is in terms of a specific tactic that you can use to answer questions at scale. Another really interesting approach. So the third section here, how do we get the community genuinely engaged? So digging a little bit deeper into that. First of all, again, as a continuation of the previous slide, it's asking the right questions, how you ask them, and then what are the questions that you actually need to be asking. So, it could be around pain points, it could be around desired features, it could be around, this is another interesting one that Lawrence brought up from his experiences. What prospective partnerships would you be interested in seeing? This is another really interesting way to get a sense of what other projects people in your community are excited about, what direction they think your brand could actually go. You'll find some really interesting nuggets with that. We've done a bit of that ourselves. The other thing that we've been doing a lot at Beaxy is contests, right? So we had a referral campaign that did very well for the first 2 weeks, to the point that it was probably too successful. It kind of inundated people's Twitter feeds for, at least 14 days straight. And we got a lot of good feedback, but that obviously can be a little bit shocking or frustrating to people. But we didn't want to take our foot off the gas entirely. You don't want to just pull your foot off the gas and screech to a halt there. So how do you keep the interest flowing? How do you keep content flowing? Well, we thought contests was a great way to do that. So we had seen Deribit, which is another new derivatives exchange, run a meme contest, and it did really well. It had great engagement. They had some cool prizes, and it was a really good idea. And I had seen that a few weeks back, and I said, I definitely want to do a meme contest at some point. We're also, it's good that we know a lot of great content creators already in the community, so we have a captive audience. Even if you don't have a captive audience, it's not too hard to identify who these folks are. You can just kind of do some keyword searching on Twitter for different crypto meme contests, and you can find a lot of these folks. But that was one idea, and then a design contest. So help us design logos, help us design apparel, help us, just create content. And we got some great submissions out of this. So we got a really great video that, it's as professional of a video as we could have paid for with cash, and didn't have to because of the contest. Got really great logos, other concepts and things that we can use going forward. And then suggestions can always come out through there too. So just, what do you want to see? Interactive dialogues are also really important. So live streams, what we're doing now as we speak, is a great way to engage folks, right? So this is obviously fitting with Omnisparx kind of brand platform and goals, is to engage, community and content creators in community and the leaders of those communities, as well as their constituents. What better way to do that than put out thought leadership pieces and pieces where we're all engaged and talking about how to be better community managers. So that's a great idea there. AMAs, right? So these are kind of a bread and butter approach in crypto. Everyone does an AMA, but there's interesting ways that you can mix that up, right? What about an AMA swap? So you go into a partner community or another community that you're interested in working with. Going back to that polling, right? You ask questions to your community. What would be interesting partnerships? You get a number one response, and then you approach that company and say, we'd like to do an AMA in your Telegram, and then invite you to do an AMA in ours, right? So there's ways that you can mix that up and make that fun and exciting. Meetups and events too, don't need to go too much into that. The last piece here, which is super important, is just gamifying everything. You want everything to be competitive. You want everything to be exciting. And so it has to be something that at every turn has a layer of gamification. You can have individual games. You can form teams. I would really emphasize the formation of teams as a powerful method, as a powerful approach. So really start to think about, within our product, within our existing social channels, how can we gamify everything? So this is another one that's near and dear to me. I think it's super important to do, and it's ironic in crypto, which professes itself to be a trust minimized system. And while decentralized systems are trust minimized inherently, they're not devoid of trust. They aren't able to function without some element of trust, right? So it's quite literally essential to what it means to be a community, and it always will be. The elements of trust that I identified, and I had done some research for fairly noteworthy clients on this with my previous job, and it's something that I've looked at a little bit in grad school and just kind of pulled together over time these things that I think are key elements. The first is honesty and integrity. And the question here that you need to ask yourself is, what are you doing to convey these qualities? Are you taking measures to actively message about this, about how we are honest and how we have integrity? I'll give you an example. For Beaxy, we have just secured a partnership with cybersecurity giant Optiv to do a full audit of our exchange architecture, right? It costs money. It's not cheap, right? And so the reason that we do that is because we, first of all, want to do it right. We want to have the right product. But then, are you messaging about that? If that were us and we never messaged about that, and as kind of a statement like, look, we are representing that kind of integrity and honesty, we wouldn't really be getting the bang for our buck. So there may be things that you're already doing that you don't have to spend new money on that convey honesty and integrity. Just talk about them. Functionality. So is your product and team worth trusting? Do you work? If you don't work, there's not much that you can do about this, but that is an operational variable that's always important in trust. Support. So do you offer customer support? And this is really important in crypto because there's often so many issues with support that people can get tangled up on. And so if you're offering customer support, talk more about it, be more communicative about it, put more resources into it. And then privacy and security. So are you protecting users' information? Is your platform and service secure? Do users know that you're protecting them? This goes back to the first point. Are you conveying any messaging that says or reinforces the value of trust? Oftentimes it's that you may have a perfectly trustworthy platform or community or system, but you're just not telling anyone about it. So start telling people about it. I included a link down here to a really great report from HSBC, which I find tremendously ironic that they put out this report on trust and technology, which is a whole other story. But read it, it's really good, very specific to the kind of tech space and what it means to be trusted. So another question that I thought was excellent and is a very pertinent issue in communities today is addressing spam and abusive programs. So, I think the main thing that came out to me here is don't just use Telegram, use Discord. I'm a huge advocate of Discord. I think its ability to organize and manage multi-levels of communities with varying permissions is a huge differentiating factor and advantage to using Telegram. Now, that said, there's a reason why crypto prefers Telegram or has preferred historically using Telegram. It's quick, it's easy to use. You can throw a bunch of people in a big hopper and it's, all well and good. But there's other things in Discord, additional phone number verifications and measures that actually can help prevent spam. So as a tool, it's just fundamentally better. Telegram is inherently spammy, and I don't know if that's going to be fixed in the future or if that's something that could be fixed without jeopardizing other qualities of, yeah, that's a good point in the chat, the IP bans. There's a lot of things that you can dig into with Discord. I didn't want to list them all and clog up this slide, but there's a lot of things that happen or tools that are available in Discord to kind of prevent that nonsense from occurring. The other thing here, I think, is not necessarily related to removing the negative, but it's finding the positive. So research to discover your most valuable community members. This is super important, and this is actually a point where Omnisparx can offer tools to do that don't really exist currently. There's ways to do it, right? You're going to know on a qualitative level like who your most valuable community members are just over time. You're gonna find those folks, kind of, you'll suss them out from the crowd. But it's going to be really cool to have access to kind of enterprise level tools to be able to do that, to automatically like label and tag MVPs. So I'm super excited about getting my hands on that eventually. The other thing is, don't encourage low value community members. This sounds really bad to say, like that sentence just sounds bad, but if you think about it, it's not. It's you don't want to over engage folks who are very obvious detractors and who are there just trolling. I mean, community in crypto is heavily inundated with trolls. That's just what it is. I made that joke the other day on a podcast. It's like, if you're not getting trolled, you're obviously not doing enough, but at the same time, you can't encourage them. You can't be there engaging and giving your energy to every person who wants to troll. So know when to respond, know when to just filter people out. And then seek to understand patterns of abuse. This is something that Lawrence and I were talking about last night. There will be patterns of abuse in your community, right? There will be certain things that you notice over and over again are being abused. I'll give you an example. In our KYC, when we ran our referral contest, the CS team who was combing through the KYC apps noticed one certain Indonesian ID kept being used to try and cheat the KYC system. We were actually able to identify where that cheat was coming from and ban them from the system. And so we prevented, literally a huge amount of time was going towards that, towards filtering through those apps. So at a categorical pattern of abuse level, we were able to identify the problem, we were able to identify a fix to the problem, and we were able to prevent problems like that going forward.
Hey, Franklin, before you go on, someone in the chat wrote about how one bad voice can silence 10 potentially productive voices.
Yeah.
So we all know how you can have a lot of positive, but it's the one negative. And so how do you address that?
Yeah, that's a really powerful statement there, right? And it's so true. One thing that I have prided myself on with Beaxy thus far is flipping detractors to advocates. So I think there's a means by which you can genuinely engage someone to the point that they can no longer logically be a detractor, right? And this just has to do with staying in the pocket. Like, don't get out of pocket, don't get emotional about it, don't get too excited about it. People are going to try and rile you up. That's the nature of what this is all about. But stay in the pocket, stay focused, just keep bypassing the nonsense and the fluff and the straw man and get back to the issue. If they have an issue, be responsive to it, be open to change, be open to take constructive criticism, and be agile enough to develop your community or your product or your business in a way that responds to that stuff. But if it's not related to a constructive product oriented criticism, it's not worth your time. So I think that one bad actor, hear them out, try and hear what it is that they're saying. And if there's something legitimate in there, definitely address it. If it's not legitimate and if it's hyperbole, bypass it and remove them from the community.
And do you have rewards or incentives for people who are kind of to help improve accountability in the community? Yeah, definitely.
I think that the main thing that we've done there is we have just been developing relationships. That previous point, there's mechanisms by which you can incentivize people to kind of self-regulate and have the community regulate itself just on a more general level, not just on the level of the individuals related to one another. But I think it's mostly about I don't think there's too much that you can do there, in terms of like building incentive mechanisms in, there are ways to do it. But I think if you build those relationships, we had a situation where someone created a an Instagram account that was at Beaxy Exchange, and that's the same handles that all of our other social channels are, right? And we didn't control that account, and it was actually brought to our attention by other influencers, people who we had just built relationships with, and so they were able to help regulate our community for us, right? We didn't actually have to go out and do any of that regulation. We've had other people create sort of fake Beaxy profiles on Twitter and do different things, and even community members who are not part of our Discord and our native Beaxy community would go in and address those issues for us. They would help us enforce, they would help us address criticisms, just because we have created such a presence online, and mostly because we built relationships. If you build relationships, people will help you, period.
Okay, great.
Okay, so improving the quality of discussions is obviously something that we all want to do in our communities. I think it can get pretty derivative in, in Telegram, especially sometimes, like when moon, when airdrop, when tokens. It gets down to those levels of a frustrating quality of discussion. So how do we improve the quality of discussions? Framing is important. So setting the stage for discussions and kind of what it is that we're talking about, in a given week, in a given month. So keeping the conversation topics fresh, but also having that regularity in scheduling. This is something that we've been working with, with Beaxy is, on a certain day of the week, we're always going to do blank. We're always going to put out a report. We're always going to put out a newsletter. We're always going to put out an email. Doesn't matter what it is. This idea of regularity, even though the conversation topics might be fresh and new, let's say it's all about, trading for this coming month. And every Wednesday we put out a report. Now, one report might be about derivatives trading. One report might be about, trading with conditional orders, and those subjects aren't really similar necessarily, but they're in the same thread of trading. So you're all under one umbrella. The topics themselves are fresh within that umbrella, and you're also able to keep regularity. The other piece there is, inviting thought leaders to the discussion itself. You can actually bring in an expert, a subject matter expert, whose authority is more or less unquestionable in a given context, right? So bring those people in, help them stir up the discussion. That can be a really cool way to keep things fresh. Whether they're incentivized or not, you can figure out how that works best for you. But I think that's a really cool way to change the dynamic of what your community conversation looks like, and just more generally offering new perspectives from outside sources. And then something that Lawrence, kind of brought up was this idea of evergreen content. Something that worked really well for my brand, the Crypto Fam, in the past, was to invest really heavily in one piece of content. So we have our lead analyst, Brad, who's a very smart guy and was doing these macro analytic pieces of research on the crypto market cycles. And they would take him a long time, and we would work together as a team on them. We would create custom charts, and we would invest so heavily in one piece of content. And you'd think, that might not pay off. That might not be the right way. Well, we had one of those pieces of content break 1,800 retweets. I mean, it went fully viral. And every time we did those macro analyses that would take us 2 weeks, they would go viral or semi-viral. So, you can get outsized returns from outsized investment in a piece of content, but it's going to magnify your potential to go viral increases with the quality of your post. And having just text is not always going to cut it. If you throw something in there, some graphics, some images, or a piece of thought leadership or a piece of research, you can really maximize your productivity with a piece of content. So the other piece there, the last piece here, is just revisit popular subjects. Keep a list when you're managing your community or your social feeds of what content has been the most successful. Try and identify common threads in what content has played well, what has gotten the most engagement in particular, not just likes, but actual comments and things like that, and what conversations have been started from a piece of content, and revisit those. rework them in different ways and try and find new ways to bring them up. Okay, so making participation equitable is important. Obviously, we want all voices to be heard, and so that would be the first piece to that, is just be inclusive and make sure all voices get heard. You know, there's research that says if certain students in a classroom are being called upon more, they'll start to think that they're right more, and you know, there's a sort of a reinforcement mechanism that happens there. So don't be the teacher that only calls on the same 3 students. You know, call on other students. The one thing that we've done too with Beaxy is, like, for folks who were less productive or engaged in our Discord community or otherwise, we would reach directly out to them and say, what do you need? Can I get you anything? Like, do you need any graphics? Do you need any content? You know, how are you? What's going on with your life? And just being genuinely interested in what's going on with them, and you know, offering to get them resources or things that they need in order to be successful. The other thing that I think makes a lot of sense here is developing participation guidelines to offer structure for people. If somebody comes into a new chat room, it could be a little daunting for them. Like, what do I do? I mean, what's okay to say? What's not okay to say? And I don't think you need to be too structured with the rules or restrictive in terms of what people say or don't. That's not so much my point, but I think offering folks a framework or a set of guidelines by which they can participate in a community is an awesome way to make them feel welcome and comfortable. Just giving them a sense of what this community is all about so that they can reference it straight away. So one thing that we do in our Discords is a start here, right? So it's a channel that just has all the core differentiators and write-ups, like, this is what we're all about, this is what you should be doing here. If you have any questions, ask this person or this person. The leaders of the team are these people. I would highly recommend having something like that if you have a Discord, or if you're starting a Discord, is that start here channel or other beginner resources, whatever you want to call it. The other piece here is just giving community members a sense that their decisions have impact. There is a huge amount of research on this. It's a very, very well proven by the data point, is that the more engaged and the more folks have a sense that their decisions actually are meaningful and have impact, whether that is real or not, right? The more engaged they will be. So, and the more they will participate. You know, it doesn't have to be that their decisions actually have tremendous impact, but the sense that their decisions have tremendous impact can be really important. So just engaging empathetically with people, indicating that their feedback will go into a broader set of feedback that will help make important decisions, and just reinforcing that. So offering incentives and not barriers for folks, and then, you know, the recognition of good ideas and the rewarding of good ideas. So, you know, I think this is the last piece here, at least for the bulk of the presentation, but, you know, creating an international community, right? How do we go about that? What do we do to create an international community? Language barrier can be tricky, but I think one thing that we can do is ambassadorship and leveraging influential voices in local markets. And so, you know, one thing that we'll be working on with Beaxy, and I've already kind of begun working on, is identifying those influencers who are in targeted geos that we want to hit. So again, market research has to come first here. You have to do market research to understand and identify what geos you even want to have a presence in. So is it Asia? Is it Latin America? Is it you know, Eastern Europe? So identify that, do that research, and then start to do some research on who the influential voices from crypto are there. And if you want any guidance or help with this, I've sort of developed a business around this and can help you identify those folks. But, you know, just finding those people and then creating those relationships, reaching out to them with an honest proposal that says, hey, we really want a consistent brand ambassador in your area, and we think you'd be a great fit. Would you be open to talking with us about this? You know, not this whole, we'll send you Bitcoin to promote us. There's some really bad promotion tactics going on with crypto companies right now. Please avoid that stuff. Go for the relationship creation. That's way more sustainable and more authentic. So leveraging the influencers as the gateways to those ambassadorship and target market opportunities. And then, there are Telegram and community translation services out there. So if you wanted to translate your Telegram community into, any Asian language or any various international language, you can do so. There are services that will charge you a flat rate to do that. And I know of people that do that if you don't and are interested in doing so.
Okay, great. So we have some questions to start. In the beginning, you were talking about influencers. Maybe you and Lawrence can answer this kind of. Who do you think does a good job of using polling? Which influencers do you think?
So there's a guy, Crypto Stratton on Twitter, does a lot of polling. A lot of the bigger influencers will do polling too. Most of us probably know Anthony Pompliano, but Pomp does a lot of great, not direct polling, but he'll ask every week, like, what's the best thing that you read this week? And that thread is like gems every single week. There's so much good stuff that comes out of there. I try and read at least one or two of those top most liked posts under that thread every week. There's Stratton is a great example of one just off the top of my head. But if you look around, you can find those folks who are doing more of the polling.
And then there's a question on customer support.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as the role of documentation versus live help versus, kind of as it relates to customer support?
I think you have to do all of it. Live help can take various forms, obviously, whether it's phone help or whether it's just someone's always on Telegram or always checking this customer support portal. If you use Zendesk, you can manage it all in one and you can have really substantial documentation. I think you want to do as much as possible to reduce the burden on your live CS team that you can do. And so you want to stack up as much relevant documentation as possible and have avenues by which you direct people's attention to that documentation. If you're not doing that, it's going to cause a ton of problems because people will call with issues that are not significant issues, or they're issues that they could find, they could find that answer in 3, 4, or 5 different places. And so the degree to which you can minimize people's reliance on your live CS team, you should absolutely take efforts to do that.
And then now here's a question. I guess Discord has been banned in China.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any recommendations for building community in China?
It's frankly not an area that I have much expertise on. Slack is another tool that's very similar to Discord, and I'm not sure if Slack would be banned because Slack's permissions and value prop are a little different than Discord. So I could see that Slack would be not banned, but Discord would. I could see that might be the case. I don't know that it is or isn't. WeChat as well. That's the other big one, which you probably know about WeChat. And then if you're having trouble with any online meetups or community organizations, I'm a big fan of in-person meetups as well. So actually organizing events where people can get together. I've done this for my community in the past, and they've always turned out really well. They're very fun just to get people in the same room and talking about crypto or talking about whatever relevant project.
And then there's a second part to this question, but I think it's appropriate to a lot of these projects is what are the issues to address when you're trying to manage communities across multiple channels? Yeah,
I think a lot of them got brought up here, which is spam. Spam is a big one. Just getting your feed clogged with stuff that's not pertinent information. Telegram especially, this is one of the major drawbacks of Telegram, is that good information and good dialogue can get buried under spam. So on that channel in particular. The other thing is making sure the channels are well integrated with one another so that you would have linking between the channels, or there might be a continuous thread. And I saw Adam brought up the point about narrative and rewarding narrative, which is super significant. And if you have continuous narratives across channels, that's a better way to do it. You want to have that cohesiveness. You don't want to be just posting one certain kind of content on Instagram and then a totally different kind of content on Twitter. That leaves a weird feeling in the consumer or in your community member. They're like, is this even am I in the right place? It can be a jarring thing. So I think you want to have continuity and continuousness with the narrative and the kind of content, the visuals, right? What colors do you use? How do you position your visual and your narrative content? That should be continuous and have a steady theme across channels.
Although I would say, and we talked about this earlier, so yeah, there is an idea about target markets,
right?
Where sometimes some kinds of markets are on one channel and some are on another. So
totally true. Yeah, and I think the broader point there would be like Instagram, right? We all know Instagram is a visual medium. So are you on Instagram for Beaksy's, point, like, are you showing screenshots of the exchange or are you showing like screenshots of text or something else? So obviously we would want to emphasize what makes us special visually, but we'd still be talking about what makes us special. We wouldn't be talking about, let's say, other exchanges or, we would want to keep the content relevant, focused enough, but obviously play to the strengths of that medium for sure, but keep the continuity and the continuousness of the messaging.
Okay, we'll take one last question, and then on the screen you can see my email, Franklin's email, and our Telegram handle if anyone has any other questions besides this one. But what are your thoughts on community collaborations? Mm-hmm. Communities competing or collaborating with other communities in similar fields?
So I talked about this with Joe a lot over the last year. Crypto offers you a really unique opportunity to collaborate instead of compete, period. Like, that is an unequivocally factual statement, right? There is obviously some competition that inevitably creeps in, but I am a hardcore advocate for collaboration above competition. I see little to no reason for the vast majority of crypto enterprises to be in any sort of competitive relationship with one another. I think resource pooling should happen more in crypto. I think collaborations between blockchains in terms of interoperability. I think collaborations between communities, all this stuff, we need to do more of that. So I'm really, really passionately advocating collaboration here. I would say I'm all the way on that scale of, not competition, but pro collaboration. Even Omnisparx and Beaxy, we were just talking like, what are ways that we can work together and help each other? We're not even, the businesses aren't similar really in any way. Except for the fact that we want to use their platform, but it's still we're here in Chicago. We're talking. We're at events, doing the same thing. We're all here in crypto together. Let's try and help each other more. Let's find ways that we can work together as communities. And so often that just starts with reaching out and beginning a conversation. That's all you have to do. Reach out to those decision makers at companies. Crypto, we're still in a nascent stage where they're very responsive. You're going to get a response from most CEOs of most crypto projects. I've had that experience myself. So start having those conversations by reaching out, and you'd be surprised what could come of that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Franklin and Lawrence, for joining us today. Next week, we have a really exciting webinar where Jenny from CBP and Lazar from Market Protocol are going to talk about how you can engage communities through education. And if anyone has any things they want to make sure that we cover next week or want to talk about how you incent your communities, reach out to us on the Omnisparx Telegram channel at Omnisparx, and we'll be sure to address that next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.